So we're talking about how intersectional theory has produced competitive victimhood, the Victimhood Olympics, as it's sometimes called. Everyone trying to whinge and wail the loudest to win the biggest prizes. Well, let's take an episode now just to hone in a little bit further on what these prizes actually look like. We've talked about status and money and platform in the past couple of episodes, but let's just take a bit more time to explore what you actually win for your victimhood in these intersectional times. And the first thing that you win, and which I think is worth talking about, is you win carte blanche to behave however you wish with no repercussions whatsoever. And this alone is a powerful motivator to claim victimhood. Imagine you're at a dinner party and you meet someone there who is really rude and mean and unpleasant, obnoxious and even aggressive. Now, under normal circumstances, you would hold that person accountable for their behavior. You would think they're not a nice person. They might even get kicked out of that party. But imagine the host then takes you to the side and explains that person's situation and explains they're a victim of something. So maybe she says something like, "Oh, please excuse Jeff. He's just lost his brother to cancer last week." That changes everything. You thought Jeff was just this obnoxious, mean, aggressive person. You wondered why he was even being tolerated at this party. But now you realize he's a victim of tragic circumstances. He's just lost his brother. So of course he's excused. He's off the hook. He has carte blanche. Nothing he says or does at that party is going to be held against him because he's a victim. Victims get carte blanche. That's the compassionate thing to do. Well, now transpose this idea onto the real world. If you can claim that you're a victim on account of being black or female or gay or whatever else, you also get permission to behave however you wish in this society with no repercussions whatsoever. When George Floyd was killed by Minnesotan police officers in 2020, the Black Lives Matter organization stirred up a crowd that began rampaging around city streets, smashing up windows, destroying property, setting things on fire, looting businesses. Now, under normal circumstances, of course, they would have been arrested for that criminal behavior, but because they'd claimed victimhood, our institutions that have been ideologically captured by intersectional theory gave them carte blanche. It was deemed that whatever these people did, being victims, it was allowed. Instead of arresting the unruly mobs, the police were even seen begging for forgiveness and taking a knee at their feet. Now, when others around the world saw this, the sere finger reflex kicked in, the younger brother syndrome, if you prefer. Even though the George Floyd event happened in another country, on another continent, and had nothing to do with British society, the British police force, or British government whatsoever, many here in the United Kingdom saw what was happening across the pond and thought, this is our chance to get some of that action. I would quite like some of that. This is our chance to loot shops and get platform and position and have everyone kneeling before us in sympathy. And so it was that many people in Britain began ludicrously claiming that they were somehow victims of Minnesotan police, and therefore were also justified in a criminal rampage. It's like the younger brother coming into the room holding up this unsplintered finger and saying, look, me too, me too, me too, I want that as well. And the full buffoonery of this was demonstrated when the British protester copied the American chant, hands up, don't shoot. And the reason this is so silly is because the British police force, as a matter of course, don't actually carry guns. They were just younger brothers trying to get a piece of this action. And because of intersectional theory, looting, arson, vandalism, and destruction was not only allowed, it was celebrated, it was feted, it was sympathized with. British police officers began kneeling before British criminals, asking for forgiveness for something that was nothing to do with them. It was all so performative. Speaking of evading justice, this is very closely linked. In November 2021, a British Member of Parliament called Claudia Webb, a left-leaning black woman, was charged with harassment when it was discovered she was bombarding a love rival called Michelle Merritt with threatening phone calls and messages. During this campaign of intimidation, she threatened to permanently disfigure Merritt by throwing acid over her. She also threatened to release naked photos of Merritt to her family. Now, when Webb was brought to court to face justice for all of this, she repeatedly tried to use her sex and skin colour to claim victimhood, knowing full well that because of pervading intersectional theory in British courts, that would likely give her carte blanche and she would be let off the hook. She said, "I'm a black woman in a white court facing a white system and white persecutors. I've been deliberately targeted because I'm vulnerable. I know firsthand the sexism and racism institutions and media use to vilify black women." Now, this calculated and very cynical line of argument actually works. She wasn't targeted because she was a black woman. She was brought to court because she was guilty. And she was found guilty, but because she appealed to victimhood, she was given this very lenient and suspended sentence. She wasn't sent to jail. So intersectional theory is enabling criminality. And we now regularly see people who've been emboldened to rob shops and supermarkets, now knowing that their skin colour and sex gives them this cloak of protection. They just stride in brazenly. They don't attempt to hide their identity. They just clear the shelves. They know that nobody's going to stop them because they don't want to be accused of racism or sexism. Recently in Germany, we saw a woke judge letting 8 men who gang raped a 15-year-old girl walk free on account of their skin colour. They gang raped, but they were let free. A few years before that, an Afghan man raped an 11-year-old, was let free, and then he promptly raped a 13-year-old. We're just seeing more and more stories like this. In the UK, Asian men of primarily Pakistani descent were found to be grooming and raping young girls for years, but because of their skin colour, the police didn't want to get involved because they didn't want to be accused of racism. We're seeing migrants stabbing people and being released, even migrants murdering people and being released because under intersectional theory, they're a protected class. The woke media will also hide these crimes. When the BLM looters were looting, the media insisted it not be called looting because that's racist. They also insisted there was no violence when there clearly was violence, and that of course led to a lot of memes at the time. If you can claim intersectional victimhood, you can increasingly do whatever you want with no repercussions, no matter how depraved. And therefore, intersectional theory is promoting and enabling criminal behavior. Here's another great example of someone trying to manufacture victimhood to evade justice. This woman's handcuffed. She's being escorted by the police in a wheelchair, but she knows that if she can just portray herself as a victim here and change the optics of it, she will likely win carte blanche and be released. And so just like the little brother in the poem with his amateur dramatics, this woman goes for the Oscar.
Oh! Ow, my leg! My leg! Oh, you hurt my leg! Please stop! Please don't hurt me no more! Please don't hurt me no more! Please don't hurt me! Please don't hurt me, sir! I do want to get up, sir. I want to help up, but you have my hand.
The frustrating thing is that nonsense like this actually tends to work now. Become a victim and you get to do whatever you want with no consequences. You get to evade justice. So everyone's rushing to position themselves in this way as a victim. Another big prize for being a victim is jobs you're not actually qualified for. Firstly, let's talk about university here. It's been discovered that certain British universities are only accepting British applicants if they mostly achieve A's, but for overseas students, they'll accept C's and D's. So foreign students are getting university places that they haven't actually qualified for at the expense of those who have. And then this kind of carries on into the workplace now. Intersectional theory means that companies are now so obsessed with employing people only from these categories, regardless of whether they can actually do the job, something called a drive for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they're employing people who are not actually qualified. So let's say there's a job opening and it receives 100 applicants. And let's say the most qualified top 30 are made up of straight white men. They will all be instantly ignored, thrown in the bin in favor of the first person who's black, female, lesbian, trans, or what have you. So in June 2021, The BBC banned white people from applying for jobs on 2 of their shows, Springwatch and The One Show. In 2024, it was leaked that BBC staff had been instructed not to employ people who don't agree with this intersectional theory. In June 2023, the Royal Air Force had some internal emails leaked that revealed that they were deliberately ignoring pilot applications from white men. The correspondence from a squadron leader read, "I noticed that the boards have recently been predominantly white male heavy. If we don't have enough BAME and female to board, then we need to make the decision to pause boarding and seek more BAME and female from the recruitment force. I don't really need to see loads of useless white male pilots." So much for white male privilege then. And this is happening all over the place now. You'll see this in the news almost every week. Wherever you turn, people being given jobs that they're not actually qualified for, they don't have the talent for, simply because of their skin color or their sex or their sexuality. And of course, we then see the Sarah Finger or younger brother complex, or reflex rather, beginning to happen here too. People saying, oh, there's jobs available that I'm not actually qualified for, but I might get it if it turns out I'm a victim of something, therefore I will pretend to be a victim of something. So let's take the case of a white, blonde-haired woman called Rachel Dolezal. She saw the opportunities available for being a victim, so for years she pretended to be black. She darkened her skin and frizzed her hair and was given all of these opportunities as a result. She was given a job as the president of the NAACP, the chair of Spokane's Police Ombudsman Commission. She was given a local newspaper column and a job as a lecturer at Eastern Washington University. However, this happened and she was eventually caught out.
Is that your dad?
Yeah, that's my dad.
This man right here is your father? Right there?
You have a question about that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I was wondering if your dad really is an African-American man.
That's a very, I mean, I don't know what you're implying.
Are you African-American?
I don't understand the question of, I did tell you that, yes, that's my dad. And he was unable to come in January.
Are your parents, are they white?
She was being a little brother. She was pretending to be a victim of something merely to get the rewards. When it was revealed that she was actually white, she lost everything that had been built upon her victim status. All of her jobs were taken from her. So when we understand that by rewarding victimhood, you encourage people to claim that identity, and you'll even get people faking that identity because it's within that you get jobs you don't deserve and carte blanche to behave however you wish with no repercussions, and you get status and affection and love and compassion and platform, and you can even evade going to jail. The question is, why would anyone not want to be a victim under this framework when it's so heavily incentivized? All the good stuff happens as victims. So why would anyone want to rise above victimhood when this is how you get feted and celebrated in this world? I once made a video for a pastor who ran a drop-in center for drug addicts. And in this facility, they were offered warmth and food and friendship, conversation, counseling, prayer, a listening ear. I believe there may have also been money available to them through a government grant if they could claim to be a part of the recovery program there, although I'm not sure about that. And my memories of visiting that was going on this really dark winter evening, but it was cozy inside. There was camaraderie and friendship, and there was lots of laughter. They were eating lots of free pizza. They were drinking Pepsi. It was just a warm, cozy place to be. Now, during a conversation I had with that pastor later on, he said something that's really remained with me for many, many years. He said it's really easy to get a drug addict 99% of the way towards recovery, but that last 1% can often be near impossible, he said. He said the drug addicts understand that they only get these benefits as long as they're considered a victim of addiction. The moment that they're fully recovered, they're expected to take full responsibility for their lives again, and all of these perks come to an end. There's no valid reason for them to keep coming to the center, which means that they then miss out on the free warmth and the food and the friendship and the conversation, the counseling, the prayer. No more financial support and government grants, no more free pizza and Pepsi. Instead, it's time for them to go get a job and start running their own affairs again. And the pastor said that when faced with the prospect of losing these perks of their victimhood and actually getting jobs and making their own way in the world again, they would often deliberately choose to relapse. They would choose victimhood. because that's where all the good stuff is. And that's kind of what I mean. When you incentivize victimhood in society at large and offer jobs and platform, position, love, affection, respect, carte blanche, what motivates people to possibly leave that victimhood behind? There's a relevant story in the Bible where Jesus met a disabled man by the pool of Bethesda. Now, this man had been lying by the pool for 38 years, and the Bible says that when Jesus saw him and knew he'd been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" That seems a really unusual question. Of course, a disabled man would like to get well, wouldn't he? Who would want to remain a victim of disability when they're being offered the chance to walk and stand on their own 2 feet? Well, what Jesus understood was that when someone's been a victim for a really long time, they become reliant on the advantages of their victimhood. After all, if this man were to be healed, he would have to take responsibility for his own life again. He would have to get a job and support himself. No more free handouts from the passers-by. So this is another problem we see in this age of intersectional theory then. Victimhood is so incentivized that people are choosing it when they're really not one and never have been, and they're choosing to remain in victimhood when they have been, but they can now leave it behind, really. And we'll talk more about why that's important in the next episode.